Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm very excited to share with you all a new episode of my thrift store makeover series where basically I go to a thrift store, look for things to paint on or to customize or to make new, and for today's episode I found this giant hand fan thing, and I've always loved hand fans in all different styles and different designs. And when I was younger, I actually collected them, and I was super happy to find this giant fan at the thrift store, and I thought it would be perfect for customizing. And I've always wanted to make my own fan. I never really thought of making one this big, but I was gonna miss out on the opportunity. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm starting off by taking off all the tape and stickers and other papery things stuck onto the fan and just start preparing it and getting it ready for customizing. I start by gently tearing, or I guess more accurately taking off the fabric that was already on the fan. I wanted to be careful to make sure that I didn't ruin any of the wood on the fan, but also I wanted to be careful not to ruin the fabric because it was going to end up being my pattern for the fabric that I was going to cut out to replace it. And so I needed this fabric to stay in its original form as much as possible so I could use it to hopefully get an exact template for the fabric that I was going to cut and end up using. And this honestly took a really long time. In some areas it was very glued on very tightly, and others it was very loose. But once it was finally done, I pinned it down onto a piece of satin fabric. Satin is honestly one of my favorite types of fabric, but it's one of the hardest to work with because it frays very easily. But I decided to go with a white satin finished fabric so it would look nice and shiny and elegant. But also, since I planned on painting on top of it, I wanted to make sure it was white so I wouldn't have to do any base coats. But that's when I learned that satin was very transparent, and so I ended up getting some white cotton fabric to sew onto the back of the satin fabric so I wouldn't have to worry about the transparency, and so it would look nice once it's finally glued. And also, as a precaution, since I'm going to be using hot glue to glue the fabric onto the wood, I wanted to be sure that it wouldn't burn through the fabric, and also so that the paint wouldn't bleed through. And so overall, just using two fabrics, the satin fabric and the cotton fabric, were a good idea just to minimize any issues, and also helped with the fraying of the satin fabric. And so that's what I did. I sewed the two pieces together, and then I ironed it flat so it would stay flat onto the fan. And then became the long and tedious process of hot gluing each of the sticks and the fabrics together. I honestly wasn't really sure how I was going to glue it, but when I was taking off the original fabric, I found that they used hot glue, and in some areas where they actually put the right amount of glue, it's glued on very well and held on very strongly, and so I decided to just go with hot glue as well. I tried to put this as straight and as correct and evenly spaced as possible, but I ended up failing in that mission. But I ended up just accepting my fate and accepting how it came out, because in the end of the day, I'm not a machine, and I didn't really expect it to come out perfectly, and so I just accepted it as how it came out, as close as correct as possible as I could get it. And then once that was done and was fully dry, the fan was basically finished. I could honestly have just left it here, but let's be real, that would be kind of boring to watch and kind of simple design. So I wanted to add a little bit more to it just to make it a little bit more my style. And as fans are a big part of Asian culture and Japanese culture, I took some inspiration from that, specifically the Japanese culture, and I decided to paint on my favorite flower and my favorite tree. the sakura flowers and sakura tree. I've always loved them and loved how they look and just everything about them. And lots of traditional Japanese fans do actually have some type of sakura design on them. And so that's what I ended up deciding to go with. And I am using fabric paint to paint on the fan because I did want it to be able to like open and close somewhat normally. And if I would have used acrylic paint, which isn't flexible at all, it would just crack and then come all off the fan and make a mess. And so unless you're planning on just having it open all the time, then I recommend you use fabric paint to paint on this and fabrics in general. And surprisingly, the fabric paint worked really well on the satin. I thought it would be some problems with the glossy surface of the satin fabric, but it actually held on really nice and I didn't have to do many coats on it either. And I'm just going with a simple sakura flower design with just 2 different shades of pinks and just painting them right on, kind of just floating in the center of the fan. It's always been a dream of mine to go to Japan and to walk into the gardens surrounded by the sakura trees and just seeing them in full bloom in spring. It's something that I hope to be able to do one day. I've always loved the sakura trees and sakura flowers, and in Japanese culture they represent springtime and the coming of spring, of renewal of life and death, and how short and fleeting life can be. And this is how the fan turned out. It's honestly a very simple design. It kind of turned out simpler than I had imagined it to, but I really liked its simpleness. It kind of gave it an elegant look, and overall I'm really happy with how it came out. I'm really excited to add this giant customized fan to my collection, and I had a lot of fun. Even though it took forever and it was a struggle sometimes, I had a lot of fun making this fan, painting it, and just the whole process in general. I really hope you all enjoyed this video and enjoyed and like how the fan came out. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe and God bless you.